Waiting. Nobody likes it, but it's an absolute necessity, especially when it comes to ministry leadership. Is there anything that you're waiting to hear from God today? Well, drop them in the comments so we can join you in prayer. I'll be right back. Hey everybody, welcome to Learn Together. I'm Saehee and I'm so excited to continue this journey of collecting and meeting new friends in this season of life and ministry. I'm super excited to host this podcast with my dear friend and one of the new friends that I actually met and one of our dear male allies, Pastor Rod, joining from Arkansas. Let's just bring him on right away. Pastor Rod, how are you doing?
Hey, good morning, Saehee. I'm doing great. It is a beautiful spring day in Arkansas.
How's the ministry going with this pandemic kind of slowing down? How are you managing that in this season?
You know, it's slow. The comeback from it is slower than I think I or anybody want, but we're healthier as a church than we were a year ago, and I think my biggest fear is that they'll all come back.
I think I feel the same fear actually. And there was a lot of changes that we had to make, as we are going through this pandemic and even like easing out of it. There's so many dynamics to this ministry leadership. I just sometimes feel overwhelmed, and I don't know about you, Pastor Rob, but as a pastor leading this church and other ministries, you have some things on your agenda and sometimes you wait and wait and wait and to see what God's going to do and when he's going to intervene. Have you ever felt that kind of intense waiting?
Oh, there's always the tension between the promise and the fulfillment of the promise. And in that gap, the expectation gap is when so many people give up and quit. It's just, they want it to happen right now, but our timing is not always God's timing.
That is so absolutely true. And I think you have a guest, your dear friend, who can actually speak into this even more. So I'm pretty excited. And who's this friend going to be?
Yeah, Pastor David Wigington pastors Cornerstone Christian Fellowship in Bloomington, Indiana. He planted the church, and in the constitution bylaws of their church, they give 33% of every dollar that comes in to missions. So
wow.
they are the smallest church in the Assemblies of God to ever give over $1 million to world missions in 1 year. So he's an outrageous missions giver. He leads businesses mission for the Assemblies of God and working to help establish businesses. He also works with a group called Stone Table that partners with missions and helps raise money. And he wrote my book of the year in 2019. Every year I pick a book of the year, and this is my book of the year in 2019, God of the Long View. It's powerful. As a matter of fact, I've had him hit the road with me and we speak together, and he shares this, and it's always better than anything I say. And so we're going to talk to him some about this concept today and about this book. And then we're going to put big pressure on him to give the book away to people watching.
That's good. What a way to champion our tribe. And that book really sounds like a very timely topic. And so I can't wait to meet this pastor with a big heart for mission. So let's bring on Pastor David. How are you doing, Pastor David?
I'm great, Pastor Saehee. Pastor Rod, how are you doing today?
Very good.
Good.
So you got the dress code right, you and I.
Yeah.
You got That's great. Well, congratulations, first of all, for writing that book. It sounds like such a timely book, but did you know the pandemic was ahead and that you were going to speak into that issue directly?
Well, it's interesting. The book has had kind of two lives. When I wrote the book, I really wrote it for our missionary family. We have a lot of missionaries who are struggling in creative access countries and places where they can't serve as traditional missionaries. So they're building a coffee shop or an English school or those kinds of things. And so I really wrote it with a pretty narrow audience in mind to encourage our missionaries. And then in the last 18 months or so, it's gotten a kind of a new life with the pandemic, as pastors have begun to pick it up and realize that, hey, there is waiting involved in pastoring too, that it's not just our missionaries in China or in Saudi Arabia, but it's pastoring where things don't happen on the timeline that we want. And a lot of times there are external forces like the pandemic that cause our timeline to be severely interrupted.
That is so true. Pastor Rod, what are some of the things that you would like for us to explore together with Pastor David today?
All right, David, putting you on the spot. Maybe we'll do a speed round. Maybe we'll do a speed round at the end. But this book is so powerful, and your talk on the book has captured so many hearts and ministered to people. When you shared in Arkansas, guys were head on the table weeping as you shared. So in this God of the Long View, what are the principles you've learned? And then would you tell us a story or two from the book? The book is rich with stories, but maybe share one of your favorites.
Sure. There are several principles that I've learned, some that are in the book and some that have sort of crystallized in my spirit after writing the book. But really, the two main principles that I think have come out of this conversation about God as the long view are that if I can be faithful now, I can be fruitful later. So if I can be faithful to God's call now, if I can do the things he's calling me to do now, then he'll give me the opportunity to be faithful later. And it's not always on my timeline. We live in a microwave culture where we want, to hit the popcorn button and 3 minutes later we have popcorn, but the kingdom doesn't always work that way. And then the other principle, that one we're pretty good at, if I can be faithful now, I can be fruitful later. The other one's a little more painful at times. And that is this principle that if I can be faithful now, someone else can be fruitful later. Mm-hmm. And that is this idea that, we're not always the one who are the answer to our own prayers. Oswald Chambers said it. He said, I've come to realize in my life and my ministry that I may be the answer to someone else's prayer prayed centuries ago. And so we're seeing that around the world. Probably my favorite story in the book and my favorite story about God of the Long View is about a French missionary whose name is Père Charles Renaud. Père Charles Renaud went to the mountains of the Yunnan province of China in the 1860s, 1862 or thereabouts. And he went to build the church in the Yunnan province. He had a vision for the Yi people group. And he went there. He took with him 2 coffee plants, not because he wanted to start a coffee plantation, but because he was a French guy who was a coffee snob. But he learned when he got there, as he was growing his coffee beans and roasting them and making coffee in this tea culture in the Yunnan province, he learned that it was a perfect environment for coffee growing. As a matter of fact, today, Starbucks has a coffee center in Yunnan where they grow and roast and export coffee beans. They have a Yunnan coffee blend. And so along with tea, coffee is now grown in those mountains. Père Charles Renaud died. I can't get in his mind, but my guess would be, if he's anything like me, he died thinking he was a failure. He didn't lead a single person to Jesus. He built some buildings that survive today, but they never functioned as churches. He never built the church in that sense. But fast forward almost 160 years, and we have a team in a town that I can't mention publicly in that Yunnan province. It's a town of 1 million people, and they own and run a coffee shop because, again, we can't be there as traditional missionaries. And so in this tea drinking culture, we own the only coffee shop in town. There's no McDonald's, no Starbucks, no Dunkin' Donuts. It's far away from the influence of Western culture. And here we have this coffee shop that also serves pizza, which they view as an American thing as well. And so this coffee shop serving pizza that is trying to build the church in this group amongst this same Yi people group that Charles Renaud came to bring the gospel to in 1860. But what we don't often understand is that when we die thinking we're a failure, God has a bigger plan. We may be the answer to someone else's prayer prayed centuries ago. And so our team is there now in this coffee shop. And in China, Pastor Rod's been there. You can't just go to whatever town you want to go to. You have to have a reason to be there. Every town you go to, you submit your passport. They take a picture of it. They take it to the local police. They have to know why you're there, what your purpose is for being there. So our team, even though they have a coffee shop in this town of 1 million people, they can't go to the surrounding villages. They can't go into the mountains because they have to have a reason to be there. Well, one of Père Charles Renaud's coffee plants survived, and they reproduced, and now there are coffee plantations, as I told you, in these mountains in the Yunnan province. And when our team discovered this, they didn't know it when they moved to the town. People said, "Hey, there's coffee grown in those mountains." And they said, "Well, of course there's not coffee grown in these mountains. It's tea culture. Why would they grow coffee? And they said, oh no, there's coffee grown in those mountains. They export it all over the world. And so our team investigated. And now, because Père Charles Renaud came to that town 160 years ago and was a failure in ministry, our team now has access to millions of people in those mountains because they go into those villages and they buy the coffee and they roast the coffee and they bring it back into town and they sell it in their coffee shop. And so because one person was willing to give their life up for the cause of the kingdom and willing to die a failure, now our team has access to millions of people in those mountains, and God's building his church amongst the Ye People group. We have multiple people who've now come to Christ through our coffee shop, through the ministry of our team there. And it all started 160 years ago with a missionary who died a failure. And so I really believe that's the way God works as he works in the long view. And so I've just used this as an opportunity to encourage pastors, to encourage missionaries and ministers that, we're not messiahs. We're not master builders. We're just workers. And he's called us to work in his kingdom. He's the architect of it. So he gets to decide if we're working on a floor joist or if we're working on the wallpaper or if we're working on electricity. He's the architect. We're just workers. And so we've got to learn to trust the architect, that he's in control, that he has a plan, and that we may be the answer to someone's prayer. We may be the answer to Charles Renaud's prayer, prayed 160 years ago. We love that part. The part we don't love as much is we may be praying a prayer that's answered 160 years from now in someone else's life. And we've got to be okay with both of those, right? The Bible says to him, a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years is like a day. We love that. We love it when God accomplishes something in a day that we think should take 1,000 years. We don't love it as much when something that we think should take a day, God takes 1,000 years to accomplish.
Wow.
So David, to that person who is plugging away, to that lady who is leading the church, plugging away, not seeing any visible results and feel like a failure, what do you say?
First of all, I just say don't give up. Don't give up, because we're encouraged in Scripture that we all play a part, right? Yeah. Paul says, I planted, somebody else watered, God gives the increase. And it's that God gives the increase part that we've got to lean on. If we really believe that, if we believe that God gives the increase, if we believe that he's in control, then we should never give up doing the planting. We should never give up doing the watering. And I would say specifically to women in ministry, to women lead pastors, that you're not alone in this. This has nothing to do with the fact that you happen to be a woman. I know male pastors all over the country who struggle every day. Somebody asked this week if I ever thought about giving up as a pastor, and I said only on days that end in Y. And so it is not unique to you certainly are unique as a woman lead pastor, as women in ministry, and I honor that and celebrate that, and we want to partner with you in that. But the part about struggling is not unique to you. We all struggle, and my encouragement to you would be not to give up, to just keep doing what God is calling you to do, and trust the architect, trust that he's got a plan, and that the problem that we have is we're not okay with not knowing the plan. Like, we're okay as long as God shows us a vision and we know the plan and this is where we're going. I don't think Père Charles Renaud knew where God was going in the Yunnan province. I don't think he imagined that there would be an American missionary couple, 160 years later, that would literally be reaping the fruits of what he planted, both literally and figuratively. I don't think he knew that, but we have to be okay with that. We have to be okay with knowing that God's ways are not our ways, and that if we'll just stay faithful, that he is faithful. And again, if I'll stay faithful now, I can be fruitful later, or someone else can be fruitful later. And that's okay. That's okay.
So I love that. I really love it. I actually love the fact that you're giving us a kingdom mindset. Number one, this is not about me, right? As ministers, we want to have part in it, but it's not about me. It's about God, and his timing is better than our timing for sure. But just kind of like even you giving us this perspective on that issue of it's not about me, but it can take generations to do something that is worth, that's eternal value. Somebody told me that anything worth doing, it should take several generations, right? And so that's a God-sized vision, and that's a God-sized ministry. Only God can handle that and lead us through that. And so thank you. I just want to thank you for that perspective, that we can celebrate others' win along the journey, and we just plug it along. Yeah.
Sure. So David, you said you want to partner So this is a good chance to put your money where your mouth is. I love this book, and I've given away a bunch of copies of this book. I want to challenge you. Will you give away some copies to women lead pastors who are watching this podcast? And I'll tell you before you do it, I will match whatever you do. So if you give 5, I'll buy 5 and give them. If you do 10, I will buy 5 and give them. I'll match what you do.
Sure. Well, first of all, Rod's maybe my best friend, but if he's not my best friend, he's definitely my most expensive friend. And so, but we have a donor in the church who believes in ministers, and I told her that I was coming on this podcast with women lead pastors and women in ministry, and she was so excited about the opportunity that she said that if I wanted to make it available, that she would buy 100 copies of my book to give to 100 female lead pastors, women lead pastors. And so I don't know the best way to do that. Maybe they can put my email address on the screen or something like that, but it's just david@bloomingtoncornerstone.com, and david@bloomingtoncornerstone.com. And if you'll email me, we'll cover the shipping and everything, and we'll ship you a copy of the book. If you want me to sign it, you just say that in the email that you want me to sign it. If you don't want me to sign it, like if you want to take it to, Second Chance Books or whatever and sell it, it's probably better if it's not signed. So, but anyway, they show up on eBay all the time. Rod knows that from his book. So, but yeah, we'll give away 100 copies to the first women lead pastors that email me and ask for a copy of the book.
Wow. Well, that little moment just cost me $1,000. So I hope you take advantage of it. And he is also my most expensive friend. That's obvious. Thanks, David. That's super generous. And please thank the lady in your church. Can we do a speed round?
Sure.
I'm gonna fire questions, and you got to answer in a minute or less each question. All right. So I said you give 33% of the income to missions. How do you pay your bills?
We trust God. We founded the church with the understanding that if we'll take care of our missionaries and our church will take care of their pastoral team, that God will provide the rest. Actually, last year we gave 53 cents of every dollar that came in to missions in our church. And so we've never wanted for anything. I've never had to take up a special offering to meet a mortgage payment. We've built 2 buildings, and we've never done a capital campaign. We just believe God and trust, and God provides for the need. When we have need, instead of focusing on us, we pick a missions project and take an offering for a missions project, and we just put God to the challenge, to the test, because he asks us to test him, and if we're faithful, we believe he provides. So we go external instead of internal in those moments.
So you're in a lot of different missions streams. What are you most excited about right now? Like what's a project that you're just fired up about?
The project that's most captured my heart over the last 2 years is Project Rescue. I believe in what Project Rescue is doing. I've been personally impacted by David and Beth Grant. And so I just believe in Project Rescue. I believe we're having some incredible opportunities right now with Project Rescue that we may never see again in my lifetime. And so we've invested a lot in Project Rescue. Matter of fact, I think we've given, just from the church, I think we've given $250,000 in the last year and a half to Project Rescue. And then we've helped raise substantially more than that through the Stone Table.
Okay. One more question in the speed round. So women in ministry, specifically women lead pastors, kind of behind the 8 ball relationally and things like that. What would you do, or what should male pastors be doing to help women pastors feel accepted and included and a part?
Well, I think it's a great question, and I don't know that I have all the answers to that. I just know that we've created structures that are artificial structures, and I think not biblical structures, that have kept women in ministry at arm's length, and that women in ministry have not been mentored and grown and discipled in the same way that men in ministry have had the opportunity to be. And I grew up in our movement. I grew up in the AG, and I grew up with incredible mentors. And so it breaks my heart when women don't have that opportunity. Dr. Beth Grant was in our college service a couple of weeks ago, and she made a comment. She was talking about, like, specifically the Billy Graham rule and talking to college students about going into ministry and all of that. And she made this comment, and I just want to read it to you so that I don't misquote her, because it is just powerful. And she said this. She said that undisciplined sexuality will bear fruit no matter how high you build the walls. And I really think that's true. And I think we've been building these artificial walls when what we should be dealing with is undisciplined sexuality. We should be having open, honest conversations about harnessing our sinful sexual nature in all of us. Because if my sinful sexual nature is a barrier to me mentoring women in ministry, then that's a me problem. And I need to fix me before I work on anything else.
Well, that's good. The book again is God of the Long View. And so between me and David, the first 200 women who are watching, who email David at david@bloomingtoncornerstone.com, he'll send you a copy of the book and pay the shipping. So this is free. All you have to do, and I'm telling you, I have given away I've given away more than 100 copies already. I've got a bookshelf outside my office, and there are currently 20 copies on there. And when a minister comes to meet with me, when somebody comes who's struggling, I always give them a copy of this book. And I guess I need to make a disclaimer. I make no money from this book. So.
Well, and when I give them away, I make no money either. So it's perfect. So be sure when you email me to give me your name and your address, because that's super important. I can't send it to you if I don't have your address. And if you want me to sign it, or if you want it personalized anyway, just say how.
Pastor David, thank you so much for sharing your passion and burden, and even having the courage and taking risk to say this is our sin issue that we need to take care of me and fix me first. Only courageous men will be able to say that publicly. So you are modeling it very well. So thank you for championing it in action. Same thing to you, Pastor Rod. You guys are joking around at how expensive you guys are to each other as friends. But what I see is you guys are so rich with your heart, with your giving heart, with your championing spirit. And I think that's something that we as women ministers also can glean from and learn to champion one another. I see Pastor Rod championing you, Pastor David, bringing your book and telling people about it, and you also matching and giving and just living it out. That's what we need to do as female ministers. We say this, we fix each other's crown. That's what we say. Yeah, we got to do that to each other a lot. So thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for joining us this conversation. And Pastor Rod, thank you for introducing your amazing friend and another male champion and ally. Seems like, thank you. We look forward to connecting with you in the near future. God bless you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Pastor Saehee. Thank you, Pastor Rod.
We'll see you later. Pastor Rod, that was just an incredible conversation. I have so many takeaways, but what was your number one takeaway from this conversation?
We are so achievement oriented. We want to see quick results now. And the thought that what you're planning now could be harvested years from now.
Yeah.
And you'll never see that. So many times we look back and say, well, that altar call was a failure. That message was a failure. That ministry was a failure, because we're looking at a very tiny slice of the influence. And your influence extends far beyond this moment and far beyond you. That fruitful now, and someone else can reap the harvest later.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that Pastor David said, be faithful now, and then be fruitful later in the future, or someone else can be fruitful, and we rejoice with that. And that's great. One of my greatest takeaway was actually just sitting back and observing you two. And today I was kind of taking the back seat and, watching you guys interact and how you guys mutually edify one another. And I'm seeing as a female minister and looking into the men's world and how you guys conversate and interact. Man, there's so many things that we can glean from. Also, I'm very hopeful, and I may be speaking for the rest of us, but I'm hopeful that this kind of mutual conversation is taking place already among our male colleagues. It's just so incredible, and it's encouraging.
Well, I will tell you, relationships take work. And I think sometimes people think it just happened naturally. So when COVID started, David and I made an agreement that we would talk every day until our churches reopened.
Wow.
And we talked every single day. And when I was down, he picked me up. When he was down, I picked him up. There's only one day we were both down. It was a Saturday. We were both discouraged. I called him, said, man, I'm just under it today. He said, I got nothing for you. And so we just kind of commiserated together. I hung up the phone, and about a minute and a half later, I called him and I said, the Lord gave me a song. And we sang the worst sounding duet in the history of music. But when we were done singing that song, we were positive and hopeful again. And so relationships take time and investment, and it's worth it.
And intentional. You have to
Very
be
much.
Yeah, and I appreciate your friendship with me, Pastor Rod, this intentional relationship and every relationship that you invest, whether it is with a child. I've seen you interacting with youth at your church and they just adore you, calling you nicknames. I love it. So, I mean, you are a relational person at your core. And I think we all need to do that as people called to shepherd all these people coming from different walks of life. So I'm watching you. I'm watching Pastor David, and I think you're watching me and others too. Let's learn from each other. Thank you so much for your time together. We love you. And everybody else, stay tuned and stay plugged in on our social media and follow us at AG Women Ministers. And until next time, just keep on making new friends. God bless you. Bye.